I'm so glad to come back. I'm always here. So I guess I consider myself one of the family. Now, today, this is going to be a fun one where I'm hoping it's going to be a lot more interactive for us to kind of explore how we're thinking about when it comes to this topic. And I'll share some of the personal take of kind of where I am right now, as I call my noodling, about what some of this stuff means to me. So let me get my screen sharing here.
And Veronica, if you don't mind, for those that have not had the pleasure of meeting you, can you tell them a little bit about your background? That'd be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. My quite eclectic background. So my career journey first started as a high school science teacher. Yes, a high school science teacher. And so this is probably why I noodle a lot. I love experimentation, and I'm always trying to hypothesize some of the meaning about things. And my journey kind of led into, once I got out of teaching, into teaching software. And so I kind of had various roles, from a software trainer that led me into project management. I've been a product manager, and then eventually led me into Agile. My first job in Agile was actually a product owner. And then I became a product manager, which then I said, nah, I don't want to do that. And then I ended up becoming a Scrum Master, which then led me into Agile coaching, which then I worked as an employee in Agile coaching, and then I stepped out working in consulting. I became independent about 6 years ago, so I've had a diverse, eclectic experiences working with a lot of the big consulting firms out there, working and partnering with them on engagements. Now, I would say I think it's been 2 years ago, where I basically said, I'm done with Agile. Remember that big post? I don't know if some of you that follow me on LinkedIn, and I started getting into life and success coaching. And why that probably matters, why I'm sharing with you right now, is because guess what? It's related to some of the stuff I'm sharing today. Because when it comes to outcome-based thinking, it also is some of the personal coaching. If some of you ever gone through that on success and life coaching, we talk about achievable outcomes and the whole thing about the natural coaching models. So I'm bringing some of that in some of our conversations today. So without further ado, I'll share a little bit more of my noodles and some of that personal journey with some of the rationality in a little bit here. So today, when we talk about outcome-based thinking, I had 2 polls because I was kind of interested with the audience. And the first question I wanted to start with is really a simple one. What do we think, what's an outcome to us?
Customer satisfaction.
Okay.
I would define an outcome as a result of an activity, perhaps, or an initiative.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also think it's something, it's a result, like it's value versus like if you have output, which to me is not value. Outcomes are more about value. So that's the way I think of it when I think about what outcome.
As long as it's a good outcome.
Well, yeah. Well,
final result.
Sometimes
are we making that assumption? That's a good outcome?
Bad outcomes, it depends, right? It could be something you learn from, so it could be valuable still.
Yeah.
Hey, Veronica, what about what an outcome is not, which is an output?
We're going to get to that. I love where you're going.
I
love it. Love it. Yeah. So whenever I ask this question, I love the diverse answers. You never get the same answer. And it's because in our world, we are so used to really being output driven by nature. It's always about the things that we have to do, those tangible things. And so when you ever ask somebody, but what's the outcome that you're trying to achieve? Most people have a hard time answering that question. And I'm not any different, because if I haven't really thought through it and broke it down, I sometimes need some pause to really answer such a question. Because our brains naturally, just by habit, we're very output centric in just the way we do. We're just used to it in the way how we talk, the way we work. I mean, if you really think about it, the first time you probably were introduced to an outcome is when your teacher used to talk about learning outcomes. I know for me, when I went through education, that's how I learned what a learning outcome was. like outcome is, what did they want to get from their learning? Because that was the way I actually wrote my lessons plans. I needed to understand what I needed them, to what was the learning to get out of it. And then I would actually design it. And so that was my first experience of what an outcome was. Now, of course, I had to Google it, like what was out there of what an outcome is. And so this is the definition, not Veronica's definition. So I think this might be the Webster definition, Google one, is the way things turn out or a consequence, the noun. And so that's one of the things when we talk about outcomes, just kind of curious as we start to get in this topic today. You want to do poll number 1, Nelu, for me?
Yeah, absolutely.
I am just curious of the audience where we are with some of the group here in that. And I don't have my question memorized. Isn't that funny?
No, it's okay.
It's like I have the brilliant idea to make them, but it doesn't mean I memorize them all the time.
No worries. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen right now. All right, Victoria.
Okay.
Sorry, Veronica. My apologies. Here.
That's all right. Just do it V for short, and then you'll never get it wrong.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and share on the chat how you can actually go ahead and participate. Here it is.
This was always $1 million question in organizations, and so I had to ask.
That's true.
I feel like we need like some thinking music.
The Jeopardy soundtrack.
I know. Gotta have
Dun,
that.
dun, 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 dun,
Oh, there you
dun.
go.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay, I need somebody with a good voice to do
I
this.
think you need a sharper, like.
Fa-la-la.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
All right. So it looks like I was wondering if anybody would do the D. Which is fair because sometimes you're depending on what you do, you may or may not know. So it looks like most of the folks, some areas are moving towards it about and most of the group. Okay, so this will be an interesting conversation as we dive into this. Thank you, Nilu. This kind of gives me an idea. So a lot of this stuff, when we talk about outcomes, in truth, you'll get a lot of oh, you got to give me back sharing abilities.
There you go. Sorry.
You blocked me. Hold on here. Okay. Let me know if everyone can see where I am. Okay.
We can
So,
see.
all right. Now, today, what we're going to go through is we're going to leave here today with a couple of these things. We're going to talk more about what are outcomes and what outcomes are not, right? See, I was thinking of you. And then, why are they useful? We're going to talk a little bit through that. And then I wanted to talk about personal versus work, because there are some similarities, and there might be some things you actually can take some of the personal that we do in that life and success, type coaching that you actually can use in the work world, believe it or not. And then how to make an awesome vision. I'm going to share something. I'm actually talking to the author next week. I really love her work, and I'm going to share that. And those of you that have been following me on LinkedIn, you probably know what I'm talking about, but I won't tell you if you haven't. It'll be a surprise. And then the process of focus, what that matters too. So this is giving all these rethinks through what we think about in outcome-based thinking. Now, I already introduced myself, but you're going to notice I didn't really put what I do as a job title or profession. And any of you familiar with what's happening? He is doing some major marketing with Marcus Buckingham and his Love Plus work. Anybody familiar with that out there? I know a lot of marketing's happening. Well, I actually started reading his book before his marketing campaign started. I was actually reading his 9 Lies About Work. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend. He is a human capital researcher. He's the one that actually created the Clifton Strengths. And he is the Research Institute, runs that at ADP. So he has a lot of data and knowledge when it comes to the human capital research and data there. So where I am right now in my personal journey is I'm trying to answer the Love Plus work. And I was telling Nelu before all of you got here was I have all these things that I've done through the years, as you can see, the science teacher, the software trainer, and what might have you. What do I really like to do and what am I good at? And so what I came at is that first bullet point is product and people are my jam. And there's something when it comes to with outcomes where that really tends to sit a lot. And so some of you, I've heard, you heard me talk about change, you heard me talk about OKRs, you hear me talk about outcomes. Well, there's a huge similarity when it comes to the product world. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I know some of you are from the marketing world, which I've actually worked in some marketing departments when they wanted to actually become outcome focused as well. So that's applicable too. But it's going to be a little bit more slated to the product side today. Now, when we think about the outcome thinking and the mindset, right, it's really about focusing on those changes, those impacted programs that you have. And so we always talk about mindset, and there actually is a mindset when it comes to outcome thinking. Any of you ever thought of it as a mindset? No?
No, actually, I would say, yeah, I have.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me anyway, for sure.
Yeah,
That
and
could be a mindset.
yeah, and if you really think about why it's so hard for us to answer that question, what outcome you want to get from that, what outcome do you want to achieve? Remember, I was saying, even me, I struggle, is because our mindset and the way that we think, we don't tend to go there. We tend to go more in the outputs, the things that we have to do, right? And so that's that natural thing. It's almost like we have to kind of reprogram a little bit. So you can think about a lot of organizations that are trying to be outcome focused, how darn hard it is to actually make this switch. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been, promoting that we got to focus on outcome over outputs. And the trouble is like, how do you measure that? And how do you, show that what you're delivering is of value, other than your customers' feedback.
Yeah.
But it's not easy.
And a lot of it sometimes, especially coming from the agile world, where it's usually bottom up and it's not necessarily driven on a product way, where you have your product strategies and stuff. And this is where I'm going a little bit, and really product vision. We're going to talk about that. And I have a couple of videos that I'll play. If you're really starting at the bottom where you're the executing team and some of that stuff hasn't been thought about, and you're starting to think about the outcomes, what strategies, what are the outcomes that you're actually trying to achieve, for what reason? What is your product vision? So we're going to go into all of these types of things today, where forget about the measurement, just even the outcome in general, before you even talk about how you're going to measure it, is even a struggle. Now, how many of you seen this? This is a very popular diagram, usually in the agile world.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty familiar, right?
Yeah.
This is pretty the vanilla, straightforward. Here's your outputs. It generates outcomes, which then gives you an impact. Yada, 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 yada. But here's the thing that's really important at the bottom in the outcome, which a lot of people, this is where, Nelu, I'm channeling you, is what I talked about, change. Customer adopts or change behaviors. And so a lot of people don't think about when they're actually designing outcomes, and this is something I work on a lot, is they don't really understand the change they're actually trying to make. We never think about that as, say, like, because human behavior is something that's like one of my jams. I'm into it. I mean, that's why I did my brain-based coaching with neuroscience and what might have you. It's in products. We talk about in HR, the employees experience, all of these things, change management and everything is about some kind of behavior change. If you really think about it, there's some kind of change that we want to do. I'm going to dive into this topic even a little bit more. And, and then the other thing is that top piece is not getting really clear about the problems that you're trying to solve and for who. And so when we start to talk about outcomes, if you don't really know who you're actually focusing on and what is actually the actual problem and what is currently happening today and the changes that you're trying to create, which is going to create those possibilities, your outcome is really hard to do if you have lack of clarity. Forget about measuring. Those are just some very fundamental basics when it comes to outcome-based thinking. And I have a video for all of you. And I cut it up and spliced it in my fancy pausing. So here's the first piece of it. Oop. Is it going to play?
All right. So I mentioned earlier, grab a piece of paper. We do a couple exercises. So I'm going to channel my inner Christine Wadkey, and I want to do 2 things with you guys. So how to relaunch this, right? So first challenge in 15 seconds. I want you to draw smart people. Ready? Go.
There's the Jeopardy. There's the Jeopardy.
Everybody loves it.
I knew it was going to happen sometime.
Right?
Awesome.
Maybe you have a picture of Einstein. Maybe you have something. I know Dan had an Einstein on his cover slide. All right. So that was drawing smart people. Now let's see challenge number 2. Challenge number 2 is make everyone smarter in 15 seconds. Ready? Go.
I'm sorry, we stopped seeing the, my apologies.
Yeah, we lost the video. Yeah.
Hold on. Coming back. We're coming back. Hold on. All right.
A lot of you just kind of sitting there like, huh, I don't know what to do right now. Right? So, well, let's talk about these 2 challenges, right? What was a little bit different about them? One was really about execution, about output, about making a thing. The second one was much more focused on outcomes. One's harder than the other, right? We can ship features left, right, and center. We can output stuff like crazy if we really want, right? Just like Google had shipped Allo, but yet 2 years later is shutting it down. Right? But getting to those outcomes are a lot more valuable. They're certainly not easy either, right? And it's because product manager and project manager are not the same thing. They need each other though. Very, very important, right? In fact, I think it was earlier.
I won't get into all of that. You can watch that video later, but where I want to go with this conversation, don't worry, I'll play another segment of his. I try to get the juicy bits out of that one. But I'll drop in the link if any of you are interested in watching that whole entire video. Is why all of this is useful. So those of you at work, you're working on things. Why do you think it's probably important to understand that outcome?
You may need to pivot if you feel you've reached a point where you're not headed towards the outcome, the desired outcome, or you know you're not headed towards the desired outcome.
If you're not focused on the outcome, you might lose sight.
You want to know if your customers are consuming your product.
Right. I think it's also a motivation for our teams if they understand that it's not just about the outputs, it's the outcomes, right? And that's a motivator.
Yeah, and kind of expanding, I love where you're going with, I was hoping somebody would say it is, the outcome never tells you what ideas you need to use to how to get it, right? Like his example about make people smarter, it never said how you do it. And how do we typically get things in our Agile and our Scrum teams? And even if you were not in a Scrum team today and you're just in traditional projects, right? I remember those days. Everything was given to you in those remember those old, I say old because I haven't worked in them in years, those requirement documents, right? You're just told what you're making. And there's no thinking, no ideation, no possibilities. But then we hear all about these organizations, these skill sets they're trying to find with people, which I don't think it's fair in all truth. We want critical thinkers, problem solvers, and X, Y, and Z, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute. You're not even giving us the space to even do that. What are you talking about? That's just crazy talk. All I'm hearing is Charlie Brown. And so the companies that are really honestly trying to move there, and this is why I say it's so darn hard, because you kind of fundamentally have to shift and change things. And it's a mindset thing. Because how many of you, if you had to actually, how to make people smarter, were you stumped too? Because when I was watching this video, I was like, oh, I would have to really think about that one. And it's a trial and error. Because how do you know the first thing you make is actually going to be right? That's like somebody telling you to bake a cake and you never did, and they never gave you the recipe. They just said, make a great, awesome chocolate tasting cake, whatever, and it needs to be able to do X, Y, and Z or whatever, right? Bad example, but that was the first thing that came off my head. Now, as we get into, I wanted to kind of dive in and explore something very interesting. You know, I noodle. Many of you guys know me. I'm always noodling. And so what I did is I shared some of the things that I've actually learned in my life and success coaching, some of the stuff that we ask people on a one-to-one basis. And I thought it was kind of cool as we rationalize some of that, and you're going to start seeing some of the similarities as what we actually do in an outcome when it comes to the work stuff that we learn out there. Now, something to point out is life and success coaching is about you and your needs. But product and agile coaching, and we can put marketing and stuff in there, but I have it on there, but it's about the business and the customer needs and how you're going to contribute to the success of them. That's the difference between these two outcomes here. Probably never thought of it that way, right? Now, there are a couple models, and we'll explore some personal uses with outcomes. And so you have outcomes on coaching. So like when I learned the brain-based coaching with the newer leadership, you can see it was very solution-oriented coaching. It was outcome-driven. So the process and what we did, we were always focusing on the goals and the outcomes of how we coach. And that's where we stayed in. We never stayed in the problem space, which that technically is therapy. And we were trying to move towards being more goal-oriented. I also learned NLP is neuro-linguistic programming language. I had shortened it for success coaching. When I actually went through that, we also, the elements of success had outcomes in it. And so that was one of the things, and I'm going to show you the things that I learned of what actually an achievable outcome is here in just a minute. And then some of you probably have heard about personal OKRs, right? That's outcome driven as well. So here are some kind of uses that we use on personal use when it comes to outcomes. Now, here's a fun one. Take a screenshot or something, because you can actually take this and modify it with your groups of that and seeing if you're still working with the outcome to see if it's achievable or not. And let's walk through this together. I'm highly creative, and maybe you see already what I see. So get specific on your outcomes, right? That could be completely universal. What will you see? What will you hear? What will you feel when you have it? These are the questions I used to ask on one-on-one coaching, right? You make it compelling. Find out the present situation. Where are you now in relation to your outcome, right? That's a very logical question to ask. And then give evidence of procedure. How will you know when you have it? That's kind of getting to the point of some of those measurable outcomes, right, in the work world. Is it congruently desirable? What will the outcome get for you or allow you to do? And then what we always do in a personal one-on-one is making sure they want it. Because why do you think we probably ask that second question? Are you sure you want it? That was the second question.
So you're referring to find out the present situation, right?
No, is it congruently desired? And when we ask them, you know, what's the outcome that will get for you or allow you to do? And then we follow up, are you sure you want it?
Yeah.
Why do you think we follow up with that?
A lot of people have been told that they want a particular outcome, and so they just sort of take it as given, and then when they start to do it, they're unmotivated and fail at it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you get down to it, they're not behaving like they want it. So you gotta kind of see what they want, if they really want what they say they want.
Yeah, and as we walk through and we try to converse it to like working with a team or a group, you can look at it and say, are you sure this is something that we actually can do, right? You can kind of reverse it a little bit, because it's very deflating if you start to go in a direction that really wasn't possible. And sometimes you do have to go there to figure it out, but it's still good to ask those questions, because sometimes people come up with ideas and things or outcomes that really weren't realistic in the first place, is my point. And then we ask, even in the personal realm, is it self-initiated or self-maintained? And so we ask, is it only for you, or are you the only person in charge of these results? Now, if I flipped it in the work world, I would basically say, is this something just for your team, or who else do you actually need involved in order to make this happen, right? And getting them to think more systems thinking. See where I'm going with that? You see how I'm creatively expanding this into the work world? And then establish resources. Great question to ask, right? What personal resources do you have that you're allowed to achieve? So if you were talking to a team making an outcome, you would ask them that. Do you know anyone else who has achieved it, right? Has anyone done this before? Have you done research? You know what I'm saying? You can keep asking these kind of questions. And then my misspelling, that's imagining there. You imagining that you have it now, other than those mentioned, what resources do you get to it? And so this is kind of really thinking outside the box, is anything else that you can actually pull. And so it gets them to think about how to make this outcome achievable. Now, we really, this third to the last one is really important in life and success coaching, is checking our ecology. Because we want to make sure, boy, I got a lot of typos in this one. For what purpose do you want it? Is we want to make sure that it's clear. And what will you lose or gain to get it? Because sometimes people will make these goals and outcomes, they're not willing to do it at a loss. So say, for example, you want a new career, or you want to do something, I want to be a ballerina, but they're not willing to go live in a 1-bedroom studio or something to get there, right? In that career change. And so these are the kind of questions that we ask. Now, we can check for ecology in the work world, right? The purpose do you want it probably should go back to the product vision and the strategy, right? If we think about it that way. And then what you're willing to lose or gain needs to make sure that it's actually something, again, are there any impacts to actually going down this path? And then, of course, we always like to state our outcomes in a positive language, and getting to do that. Now, the last bullet point, I didn't give any examples on here. This is something I usually do as an exercise. I make them write their outcome in the present tense that it already happened, so they can live it, breathe it, and imagine it. I sometimes do this in the work world. That one's kind of like very depending if they want to go there with me on that one. But it helps them. What we think about is, if you think it's already there, it's possible, and that's really important, especially in life success coaching. So as I went through these, can some of you see how you might be able to use it in work world, translating a little bit like I did?
I mean, I like, what I thought was powerful is, what are you willing to lose or gain, right? Because some things take a lot of hard work. Now I'm taking this to my personal outcomes, right? What are you willing to lose or gain? Things are not easy. And if you really want something, are you willing to lose something or gain something? You got to look at both sides of things when you really want something. So that's different. I think that was different.
that was actually one of the important questions for us to ask when we were taught, because that can throw everything out of the water.
Yeah. Because some people want a lot of outcomes, but they're not willing to lose some stuff or do it, or really work hard to get the gains from it. It just depends.
Yeah. And so sometimes we have to rework an outcome that's actually truly achievable, because if you're trying to help them, you know, in success coaching, they might already be not be set up for success if you run through these questions and there's a big red flag, right? And so you can think about in the work world, we can transfer some of these is to help to make things more realistic as well. So I actually took this and modified it in more like business context language for people, but this is actually from my life and success coaching. We can actually take some of our personal learnings of how to deal with outcomes and then move them into the work world too. Because why? It's the same thing. We're all human and we're dealing with people and change. So are we ready for the work-related outcomes? So here are some examples. And I thought this was fun for us to kind of talk about. So any of you are familiar with outcome-based roadmaps, right? Or outcome-driven. So here's a picture here. And so this is where it is all about the outcomes. So again, if we take the mantra that we're not, which becomes very difficult, those of you that are practicing a lot of Agile, and this is kind of where some of the product people in Agile butt heads, where Agile and product, the marrying works really well at the executing, but when we start going a little higher and we start talking about where we're trying to go on outcome driven maps and outcome, you know, teams and what might have you, it starts to be a conflict because you're taught to create these feature lists or feature roadmaps like in your PI planning and SAFe and what might have you, that features are not outcomes, right? And so you're already delivering the solution to them. And so this is a big debate and big conversation out there in the world today. Then here's another example, OKRs. They use outcomes as well. And by the way, your outcome product roadmaps use OKRs in them too, right? They're combined. And then product discovery. Those of you familiar with Teresa Torres, she's like the big product discovery. I have the book and coming up here, so don't worry. That you start with having a vision and then you have your particular outcomes. If you're using OKRs, those are your KRs. And so what you're doing is you're coming up with ideas and opportunities during discovery, and that's kind of how that process works. Or in your outcome product roadmap, right? If that is outcome driven, you're going to do some product discovery to figure out what the right ideas that are going to drive to the outcome. See how they're all connected, but they're all outcome related. Anybody working with any of these today?
Not with the oh, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Oh no, you go ahead. Sorry.
No, just very briefly, not with product team yet, but in trying to communicate a roadmap toward agility for an organization or maybe a business unit, in basing it in outcomes and measurable outcomes quarter over quarter, and in making changes, pivoting each quarter. So trying it that way, I get a lot of resistance with what are we doing? What are the outputs? What are the doings, right? And so not with product, but that's how I'm using it, and it's a struggle right now for me.
Yeah, and by nature, and they talk about this is because that's why I said outcomes is really hard to shift. It's a mindset because the outputs is tangible and sticky, and they like their dates and like what might have you. I'm going to show you a little bit of that video, the product roadmap video. I'm having another segment, but I highly recommend all of you to watch it on your time because he talks about that nature of the outcomes and what might have you. It's definitely I don't know if any of you I can't get it out of my mouth today. Melissa Perry, she Marty Kagan, there's a couple of others that they are helping organizations really adopt a chief product officer, and those don't usually exist in organizations. And so to really drive a lot of these things that I'm talking about, you kind of need to go there and have that representation that really understands that. So there's a huge opportunity in the market today when it comes to when we talk about product agility and when we talk about what happens above product agility. Product agility is where the product discovery and the execution happen. but everything when it comes to strategic oriented piece of it, when it comes to product strategy, that's a whole other world. And I'm going to show you a couple of things, but those are a little bit different. Are you ready for another segment of that video?
Yes, we are.
Always.
There. Well, remember, features are intended to solve some kind of problem, get you some kind of outcome, right? This could be placed into some kind of theme, like improve the invoicing options, or maybe expand payment types. Okay. So it's no longer about themes. And their product team say, well, look, we don't know which features we're going to build. We give the teams the freedom to figure it out. Right? So you're probably like, whoa, wait, what are we going to build? How do we know what to build? I think the question Dan said was, what are engineers have to build something, design something. What are we going to do? Well, this is where we need to break things down a little bit further. There are outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And I want to break them down a little bit. So outcomes, this is the features, the what you produce, the product, right? What-if-I example might be the new invoice auto bill, right? But then we say, well, what problem does that feature solve? That's good. You want to take that a step further? Ask the question, if we solve that problem, what's the outcome we want to see? Right? So this is where you want to drive to the outcome. You want to separate the output and the outcome. So in the waterfall example, the outcome would be less support calls around invoices. Cool. It's behavior change in your stakeholders, users, etc. And then the metrics or the impacts would be the metrics. How do we know we've actually done this? What's been the increase or decrease to our business, right? So a 12% decrease to our support costs. Awesome. You may recognize these as objectives and key results.
Okay.
And again, a theme might be like improving invoicing options, right? The theme is kind of like a headline to the problem or need, right? If you think about headlining something, it's really what themes are good at. They're headlines to the problems, needs, outcomes. And they all need to come into a strategic hierarchy. So as Christina mentioned earlier, product owners, product people own the vision, right? How does that all align? And this is a little bit inspired by Teresa Torres, her opportunity solution tree, right? You've got a product vision that supports your company mission. You've got objectives, which are helping you get to your product vision. And then from there, you might have themes, which get you to this. And then from there, you may have some features or solutions that get you to this, right? And so the roadmap would be either the outcomes or objectives and themes, right? Your outputs, your features, those might be on your release plan, right? You can take this a step further, like Teresa's opportunity solution tree, and have experiments. And those things could actually be on your release plan, perhaps, or maybe an experiment plan, things you're going to do, okay? So I know I said this wasn't going to be a how-to roadmap talk, but
I'll make you watch the rest of it on your own. Now, I really love like some of those though. I had to show that for all of you, but it's quite interesting. I think he really explains it well, the difference between, and let me go back here. I kind of jumped up a little head here because of the books. So he is one of the authors, Todd Lombardo, and then there is Bruce McCarthy is one of the authors as well. The other one I haven't really followed, but I followed Bruce McCarthy. Actually, I shared it on my blog article today from Product Culture. That's his business. And so they made this product roadmap. This is back in 2018. It was published. So it's a good book. I recommend go check it out. And then when he was talking about Teresa Torres, and I mentioned that's the continuous discovery habit. So I put some of the books that we're mentioning here as resources for all of you. So I didn't want to skip over that. Got lots of juicy nuggets for all of you. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to make outcomes effective. There's a lot of talk out there about just outcomes by itself. It falls flat. I actually had a conversation with a product coach the other day where first it started on LinkedIn and then it was text message afterwards around that whole topic, especially with OKRs. And, there's a lot of people that have some opinions around this because they've seen all the anti-patterns and the smells, of all the groups working towards outcomes. And so all I'm going to talk about here are some getting started. These are my noodlings of what I've kind of found so far. What are the 3 musts? And it is so important to have a clear and specific vision on the change you want to make. And if we're talking about product vision, this is where we'll reference that for this conversation. If you don't have a clear, concise product vision, then you are probably need to go back and make that, because what are you making your strategy off of? And so that next thing is your strategy and to connect to the why and the how and the prioritization, right? You have to have some of that, the prioritization that's going on that's infused to your vision. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the vision in just a minute here. And then you want to focus on the process to achieve your goals, because what does process give us? Action, right? And so I have a video of Michael Phelps at the end kind of talking about why process is important too. And so that's why I put it on the last bullet point, because if we don't get to action and we don't focus on the things that we have to do every day because we don't hit our targets or what might have you, what happens? We lose steam, we lose focus because things aren't happening. So that's why the process is so important. And this is where Agile comes in, because it has the discipline, it has you getting to action, it has your sprints, or if you're doing Kanban, regardless, it all has a regimen, a rigor, a cadence. So you make sure that you're still getting to action and continue going forward. So this is why all of this is so important when it comes together. That's what makes outcomes. And then there's the other thing when it talks about measurable outcomes, but the reason why I didn't put that in there, because most people already know about that. It's these things that get lost in the mix. Now, I have a share. This is actually one of my new loves. Yeah, fresh off the press, folks. You should see my book. I have never had so many darn bookmarks in this baby. It's ridiculous. It's also solving some of my puzzles and questionings when I had about some of the things that I was kind of seeing out there when I would do vision statements or when I would do certain things. And I got really into this. And so one of the things that stood out to me was her explanation around vision-led versus iteration-led. And it was like mind-blowing. And she talks about the iteration model, which is kind of where it defines where you go. And then a vision approach helps you refine where you're going to get there. Now, she talks about, any of you familiar with the Boeing 737 and then the 737 MAX that they had to take off the line?
Yeah, I saw the Netflix show, if you saw it.
Yeah. Well, that's one of many examples that she actually talks about in the book of being an iteration-led company versus a vision-led. And she talked about, was it Ford or Chrysler, one of the car companies? They were so wanting to, in iteration-led, to get something out and more not about the vision of what they wanted to do, that they ended up using the body construct of the 737 and turned it into the 737 MAX. And she goes into quite detail around that and why it failed, because they weren't going by a vision. Now you see this a lot in startup companies, because what are they motivated by? To get funded. So if you're a cost-driven company, which one you probably are, vision or iteration-led?
Vision, right?
Cost cutting, cost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You're all about the things that you do. It's never about the vision of what your purpose is. And so all the things that you're going to do is highly reactive to what you need to do to suffice that. It's quite amazing how much she goes into detail on that. Now you know why it's my new love. And it just went in my head. Now, she has a whole process here, which she calls radical product thinking, but she uses this. She had 4 companies that she actually turned, and 2 of them she started herself. And so she also talks about companies, and I'll share you one example. This one is her wine company, that it's not only just a product, but it also you can think about it as your company vision as well. And so this is her way of kind of looking at to make sure you have purpose-driven products. And so you have your vision, right? You have your strategy, you have to prioritize your execution, and you have the culture. But here's the thing that's kind of interesting, since this is an outcomes conversation. Outcomes here, and you'll see it in a moment. Outcomes in the prioritization, and you'll see that all as well, and how you're going to deliver. Because remember, if we have an outcome roadmap, right, and what might have you, or the things of how we're prioritizing, it's very outcome focused. And then also, we execute, right? We have targeted outcomes. We're experimenting. Remember, I showed you the product discovery. And then, of course, culture and people, we're thinking about the behavior changes and the outcomes for that, right? What are the things? So all of these, except for that one piece in strategy, you don't tend to think of more of the outcomes in that piece in the same way, unless you're doing strategic OKRs, right? But it's outcomes are really not just in one place. They really kind of thread through this entire thing. Now I'm going to play her video before I show you and explain. This is the best vision template, and she created it like through Mad Libs. I was like, I used to do Mad Libs when I was like 5th grade in the back of the bus, and we used to do them, and it was so much fun. And this makes sense. Imagine if we're all, you know, either physical or virtual, that everyone probably has a different word or description and filling this in, and then you have that divergent and convergent thinking. But here, check this out.
Hi, this is Radhika Dutt, and today we're going to talk about the radical product thinking approach to creating a good vision. When we think of a good vision, we think of something big and aspirational, what's known as a BHAG, which is a big, hairy, audacious goal. The problem with having a BHAG for a vision, though, is that we often focus so much on being big that we lose track of where we're going. We care so much about being big and audacious that we often neglect the problem we set out to solve in the first place. We've also learned that a good vision has to be broad, so you never have to change it. But think about it, the whole world is changing around you constantly. So shouldn't your vision too change periodically to help you adapt to that world that's changing around you? To create a broad vision then, so you never have to change it, just seems counterproductive. Now that we've busted these long-standing myths about a good vision, we need a new idea for how to write a good vision. A radical vision. A radical vision has these characteristics. First, it has to be centered on the problem that you want to see solved in the world. It's not about your goals or your aspirations for your company. And by the way, this is why to be the leader in is not a good vision, because being the leader is about your aspirations. It's not about what your customer needs. Which brings me to the second point. A good vision galvanizes not just your team, but also your customers. When you share your vision with your customers, they should be nodding along with you. Third, a good vision should help you and your team visualize the end state that you want to bring about. What does the world look like when you've solved the problem you set out to? Now that you know how to write a good vision at this point, starting with a blank sheet of paper is still really hard. Think about the last time you were in a company offsite playing vision bingo. It was painful, wasn't it? To make sure you never have to play vision bingo again, you can use the radical product thinking Mad Lib statement for your vision. Here's an example of what this statement sounds like, and I'm going to fill this out using the example of a wine startup I sold in 2014. Today, when amateur wine drinkers want to find wines that they like, they have to pick attractive looking wine bottles or try what's on sale. This is unacceptable because this leads to many hits and misses, to many disappointments. We envision a world where finding wines you like is as easy as finding movies you like on Netflix. We're bringing about this world through our recommendations engine that helps you find wines you're likely to like, and our operational setup that quickly delivers those wines to your table. Now, this is a radical vision. It tells you exactly what problem we were solving and how we were solving it. Want to write a radical?
So here's her full one on the side, because she kind of shortened it in that video. Big difference. You actually have clarity, who it's for, the desired outcome, how it's currently have, and it's so different from a lot of the visions you've probably seen. Now, if you had to start figuring out what you were going to build or move off from that, your strategies, is that a little easier and clearer than a nebulous vision that most of the time you read? You ever get those visions, best in class for what? Yeah. So I really liked her vision worksheet. So I can give you the link. You can go to herproductthinking.com and you can fill out her thing, and she has a toolkit of other things. I'm only showing the vision worksheet because I thought that was enough. It's no need to kind of go into that. That's like a whole other session with all of you to share all those things. But in this vision worksheet, there are these questions. And this is my teaser I posted on LinkedIn. These are great questions. Whose world are you trying to change? If they can't answer that question, we probably need to figure that out, and you probably need to do some customer user segment research. What does their world look like today? If you have no idea what their world looks like today, then you probably don't know what their problems are. And then I love this one. Why is the status quo world unacceptable? Now, you probably never thought about this, but when we do change and we're introducing something new, it always is about challenging the status quo, because if we're building something that's already there, then you wonder why no one buys it. And she gives an example of, remember the little Segway thing? And they thought that that would actually, a lot of people, you know, would want to take that in the big cities, and the Segways would be all popular. Well, that business didn't do really well. Who do you only see on those Segways? Police officers or the tourist. No one buys it to actually use it as transport in the cities, if you ever noticed that. So their whole vision in that company, it flopped. No one really thought it was a problem, was my point. And so this gets everyone to start thinking about, and imagine the companies and the startups that don't go through this activity. And again, that 737, or, you know, you can have a company and have multiple different products, but every product should be challenged with this. I would say even companies should be challenged of their existence by answering some of these questions. And so when will you know that you've achieved your vision, right? What are the shortcomings? And then how you bring about that change. Any of you ever, some of you have ever done a vision activity? It could be a change vision, any kind of vision. Have any of you guys ever done a vision activity? And how hard was it sometimes to actually create your vision?
Depends what the mindset is.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But if you had to answer these questions, would you think about your vision differently?
Kind of makes it easier, right? Because you have like clear steps to follow, and it helps you realize what the actual vision is comparing to what you think.
Conveys it better, right, Victoria? somebody reads it, these are the things, the good content.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult when you're doing one of these workshops, right? It's always good to show examples because everybody's idea of the format or what a vision is completely different. Everybody's idea of the vision is different. But then the how to write a vision, everybody's idea of that is also very varied, right? So it's always really good to show examples. This is pretty good.
Yeah, I had a vision workshop with one group. We actually had to come back the next day because they weren't landed on it, and there was such divergent opinions. And Radhika talks about that her workshops for her vision worksheets aren't as painful to get through this because of this structure. So she's actually tested the application of this, and then she's also done it what she does today through her business. But I really love it because you get the divergent, every different opinions, and then people talk about it. Well, why do you think it's that customer? Why do you think that's the problem? You see where I'm going? So I think that's a pretty helpful. Now, there's a lot of templates and a lot of things, and you may have found some of your vision successful, but I always usually get when you have a group of people make the vision and then they go and start sharing it with other groups, there are 20 million questions around it. And this is where she says, if you probably answer all of these, the who, the what, the why, the when, and the how, you probably would get less questions.
When I look at this, I think of how it can alleviate the loudest person in the room, taking over the vision too, right? It looks like it's extremely participatory for everyone in the room, just based on the short template and the the who, what, why, when, how. That's what I like about it. I see that it alleviates that really strong person, or maybe two people dominating the whole vision, and then other folks sinking back into the corner. So that's what I like about it.
Yeah, and try it and see if you like it. Let me know. I'm curious. I'm always trying to find ways to make things very less painful for the participants and really get to the heart of it, because it's not even just the people that have to write it, it's the people that have to consume it as well. Now, here's a process, and I found this interesting. Of course, I got my books that are related to this. And so this kind of goes into some of the mantra of some of these books here.
I'll know deep down inside that was the best that I could do that day.
So recently on the blog, I've been talking a lot about the problems with outcome-focused thinking and the benefits of process-focused thinking. Now, there's been several studies that have been conducted that show the benefits of process-focused thinking. But just to kind of talk you through it very briefly, there's two main problems when we focus on the outcome of our efforts. First of all, we lose sight of the growth and progress made along the way while we were working towards achieve that desired outcome. And then secondly, we neglect to create a strategy or a process that will lead us to success. But when we focus on the process, we're able to focus on what we can do daily to achieve our goal. And we're not obsessing with and focusing on the future outcome that we're working towards. We're instead just worrying about what we can do every single day to ensure that we move closer and closer to achieving our set goal for ourselves. As you know, it is the 2016 Olympics in Rio, and easily the most decorated Olympic swimmer in the history of the sport is Michael Phelps. And I was listening in on an interview between him and Bob Costas. And Bob Costas asked him a question that directly relates to this topic of outcome and process-focused thinking.
You're a guy who likes closure. You like the chapter to end the way you envision it ending. So suppose in Rio, you do really, really well. But in your last individual event, the 100 fly, you take a silver instead of a gold. Would that haunt you?
So Costas asked a question that, as you can tell, is focused on the outcome. He basically says, Phelps, if you were to go through your final race and you were not to achieve your desired outcome, which of course would be winning gold, would that haunt you? Why I love Phelps's response is because his response immediately shows that he is clearly thinking about the process as opposed to the outcome.
Would that haunt you?
No, because I know I could look back at how I prepared and I would know that I did, but Bob and I did whatever we could do to prepare ourselves to be the best. So I think now being able to prepare how we have, I'm willing to accept whatever results I get. I mean, sure, will I be ticked off? Probably, but I'll know deep down inside that was the best that I could do that day.
So I just love this response from Phelps because it shows you his mindset. It shows you that he is solely focused on putting in the hard work and dedication that is needed to achieve his goals. He understands that he cannot control the outcome of his efforts. He can simply control the work that he gets done in order to achieve those goals. And it just shows you that he is totally focused on the process. So just to kind of wrap things up, as we've learned today from our homeboy, Michael Phelps, when you are working towards a goal, all you can do, all you can control is putting in the work needed to achieve your desired outcome. So focus on that, focus on the process that is required to achieve your goals, and trust that if you put in the hard work, it will pay off.
So I liked that video because we learned that the good thing about what Agile gives us is that discipline. It's that process of doing those everyday activities. And so part of a lot of things that when people are using frameworks, even like with OKRs, there's a cycle. They use actually the lean startup cycle, right? It's a process. So when we talk about these goals and strategies and outcomes, we still have to attach a really good process, even from taking the strategy down into the execution, right? In your Agile teams or what might have you, to make this all effective. But once you're in it and executing that discipline, like a Michael Phelps, you have to have something to keep you going, right? And so that's where the agility comes into play. Now, wow, we got time. I'm actually on time today. I usually have long talks and things. So if you aren't connected with me, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I share a lot on there and content. I'm going to start actually blogging again and writing. So all this stuff I shared today is actually one of my noodles. And I'm noodling on all this stuff. And this is kind of where I am in my noodles of answering, what is this outcome? What does this outcome-based thinking mean to me? And all the things that are related to it based on my knowledge and research out there and where I am with it. And I'm hoping all of you found value with it today. Now I have a YouTube channel. We also stream live the Game Changing Work. So that's some of you might have met Roxana. She came here on talk. She is all on the people side. So she's a team-based leadership coach. So she does a lot of the people stuff. And we're going to have next week, we're going to talk about middle management. Where's the love? There's been a lot of research where they're exhausted, burnout, and a lot of them are quitting these days. And we're actually going to talk about that subject on the show. So if you want to join us, please do. And if you want to reach out to me, if you have any questions, you want to noodle with me, there's my email if you want to contact me as well. So we can open up the floor and talk.
Yeah. And so guys, we actually started a little bit earlier today. We're done a little bit earlier than usual, but we want to be able to ask Veronica a lot of questions. But before we do that, can everybody turn on their cameras? We want to take an amazing picture and send our love back to Veronica. So let's, everybody, if you can, if you guys feel comfortable, we take these pictures every meetup. We want to celebrate the fact that you guys are here, that we're learning, that we've got the continuous improvement mindset, and also give our great thanks to Veronica. So if you guys can turn it on little by little, let's go ahead and let me see. Do I see Veronica? Yeah, I see you there. Awesome. All right, guys, if you wanted to say thank you to Veronica, we're going to take a picture, right? But what gesture do we want to make to say thank you for this amazing topic? And then we're going to go straight into your questions, Veronica. Let's do that. So as you guys are thinking of your great questions, what gesture do we want to make? So then Nelu, then you give us the counter. We're going to take a quick snapshot.
Absolutely. All right. So 3, 2, 1. Gotcha, everyone. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Great job. And so Nailu's going to be posting this on the chat. This will go on LinkedIn. We don't ask for much for these meetups. We just ask for you guys to like it and put any comments, comment about the speaker, comment about the meetup. Please invite your friends. So Nailu's going to post it on the chat. If you guys can click on it, we greatly appreciate it. But we're not done. We're actually a little bit early. So any questions for Veronica? Any questions? This was very interesting topic. Amado has his hand up.
Yeah, so first of all, Regina and Nailu, thank you so much for organizing this thing. I know how much effort it takes to put something like this together and bringing great speakers like Veronica. Veronica, what a phenomenal job yet again. Fantastic.
Thank you.
My question to you is the following. I love what you presented and everything else, but what I see a lot is not so much around the defining of the outcomes or the process. I think that there is a gap that exists in a lot of organizations on defining a accountability cadence or a review cadence by which we look at the results that we review. So sometimes we define OKRs, we go through this wonderful exercise defining vision, we define the impacts, and then all that stuff sits in the shelf because there isn't an accountability cadence or it's lack of ownership. What have you seen and what have you experienced in other organizations that have done this very well?
Yeah, there definitely is a couple of things, and it kind of goes back to the strategy, how the strategy is related to the execution, and how does that tie back to the business strategies. And then when we start to get to that is because, again, accountability is who's looking at what is my point, right? So a lot of times that they'll talk about try to do outcomes, but if it's not driving to how it's helping with the business, right? And we're not looking at that, then you know what's keeping the CEOs up at night. What are they looking at? And everything has to tie back to each other. And so when we start to look at accountability, it goes all the way up. Then we talk about, well, how do we do that? What does that look like? What are those cadences? And so there's a couple of things that you can put in. If you're going down the OKR route, that OKR cycle is extremely important. If you're not doing OKRs and you're just doing more of the outcome base, you have the product ops is a huge thing when you talk about the product world, is that when you're starting to move towards this, and Melissa Perry talks about it a lot, she's really big on product ops, is you have to kind of talk about is how are we actually going to start adopting that? Now, why is product ops important? Because that's where your analytics come into play that is going to actually start to connect your leading and your lagging indicators, right? Your leading is basically the things you're going to test out, the A/B testing, the prototyping, and what might have you. And those lagging can take a while, right, to realize sometimes when you get it out to the market. So you have to kind of think about what does that look like in your whole entire life cycle. So when you think about accountability, it is how it connects strategy and execution. What are we doing in a cadences to actually track our progress to how we're actually moving towards our outcomes and towards those particular objectives or goals that we have, right? Whatever you're using. And then 3 is we have to measure what matters and put the operations in place to actually support that.
Thank you.
Alex.
Can I ask you a question, Veronica? So I asked Roxana the same question. I'm currently reading the book that she recommended. I don't know, Lust for Life.
Oh, okay.
She recommended this book. And I just want to ask you, what is your favorite book and why?
Oh.
Because you showed a lot of books here, so I could see you're an avid reader.
Oh, what's my favorite book? Oh, that's a toughie because I read a lot of different books, and it's almost like what's the favorite? But I'm gonna random answer. And a book that I really like was Memoirs of a Geisha, and the reason why I love that book because it was so well written, I couldn't even put it down, and I read it so quick like that. And so if I had to answer you, for some reason, that's the top of my head when it comes to a leisure book. I literally was completely immersed. I think it's very well written. I was highly disappointed with the movie though. But yeah, it's like asking me what my favorite food is, Alex. I hate to commit to an answer.
No, trust me, I'm the same way. I don't even have a favorite color. It's so hard.
Good question. You got me there.
All right. Any other questions? Victoria.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Veronica, for an amazing session as always. My question is, because you obviously need to adapt and being agile, and how do you really know, especially in like a bigger organization, that it's time to change or modify your vision?
Well, that's a good question. There are different schools of thought, and I'm going to lean more on where Radhika is on her radical product vision, where depending on where you are as an organization, you want to look at your vision a lot. So if you're more of a mature organization, you might be looking at it every 6 months and making sure, remember, this is if it's your product vision, right? And because we're thinking about it in some of those things. Now, your product vision, your company vision might be of one if you're a startup. If you're a startup, you might be looking at that monthly. You might be looking at it all because a lot of things are changing of what your assumptions of what you thought. So if you look at the way she wrote it. So she has the mindset and the mantra. It really depends on where you are in your maturity as an organization and how often you need to actually revisit. So it's not a one and done is her point. And I think that's probably the important message to drive home.
Thank you.
I noodled a lot on this, if you
Yeah.
can tell.
No, that's awesome. I think one of the big takeaways too is this: we can use this for many other things, not just for the organizational strategic planning, right? But even for the organizations that are project based, you can use these techniques to kick off a project. What is our project vision? And go through these different types of questions.
I'm doing it for myself.
Yeah.
I'm
and
actually
for
filling out the
personal.
template
Yeah.
for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she talks about, remember, it's products and services.
Mm-hmm.
And you can think of yourself as your personal branding of what the services that you provide. And so remember, I told you I'm doing my Love Plus Work challenge. I'm actually completing this vision of what I feel like I'm bringing to the world to make an impact. And I want to see how I fill that out. I thought it would be a good challenge. So yeah, it's definitely, I always say anything is possible. If you put your creative thinking to it, and Regina, that's what you're doing. You're finding other ways to actually use something.
So
isn't that what I showed you with the personal achievable outcome? That was for personal coaching.
Mm-hmm. And you translated it into business.
Yeah,
that was pretty
what
cool.
happens when you're creative.
We have a question in the chat. As a follow-up to Victoria's question, how do you approach the company to consider taking a new look at their vision?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I guess the question is, what vision? Is it a product vision or the company vision? Right? And one might be easier than the other. Because if it's a company vision, that's a loaded thing, especially if it's a public company and there's a lot of, things that kind of go with that. And so that could be a hard thing. Now, product visions are a little bit easier because then you're a little bit more centralized. Now, what would it take is probably a good conversation is how relevant is that vision today based on where we are? And when did they actually create it? Is it circa 2000? I mean, when's the last time that they have read that, looked at it? Mm-hmm. And when's the last time they got feedback on it to how clear it is? And ask them if they have their strategy, right? Any organization at some point has some kind of strategy, however they deem it or what might have you, is ask them to trace back how relevant it is to that vision. And that will get them curious, because remember, your strategy should derive from the vision. And if they can't, then that's probably a good opportunity to revisit it.
Right. Keisha, you have a question?
Oh, thank you. Veronica, thank you for our discussion today and sharing so much. What I was wondering is if you coached any organizations or groups in the past 24, 28 months through some of this kind of transformation, and how you've supported them doing that virtually or in the remote world where there's less in-person interaction, there's less groups of people in an office under the same roof in the same building.
Yeah, and during this time, I had one in person
Sure.
that I just did recently. And then I've done a vision activity virtually. And so the virtual one, what we ended up happening, and this is before I learned this vision one. So I'm just going to describe some of that, what that looked like. So we use Mural. And what I did is I had some seeding things of like, what's the current problem? And I had, some of my questions. And what I did is I took the two main leaders that I knew that were going to be the driving force of this. And I wanted them to noodle this out first with each other, because I was not going to get anywhere when the other ones come along, right? The people that reported to them. So I was like, I brought them, had a special session with just the two of them. I said, okay, we're going to do this with just the two of us. I will kick you off, but you can finish this without me. And one of them was like, I think you kind of need to be a mediator between the two of us. We have different opinions about stuff. I was like, okay. So I kind of got them started because, again, you wouldn't believe most people have a hard time making these visions. You have to kind of get the juices flowing, getting them warmed up. And so I use Mural for that. I had it all set up on there. And then I brought the rest of the group after they finished their activity, and they kind of shared where they are. One of the most important things I wanted them to explain to the rest of the group is why about this vision. And now, since I have those questions I learned from Radhika, now I even have better juicy nuggets. But I was already there with that in that vision activity. So it took about 2 sessions to answer when I did it virtually. Now in person, we did it there together, within, that day, half day, getting everyone in the room. But sometimes I give them prep beforehand because I need to get their brains around thinking. And so if you think about what I've learned right now, when it talks about the problem and whatever, I actually rather share this information ahead of time before we do the vision activity, because I don't know if they need to do research to even answer these questions to make the vision. So that's my learning right now, what I would do of what I learned just recently in the last couple months from doing those activities before. So even the one that I recently did, we did some research, customer competition and stuff, but I still have new things from, she asked some very different questions that we just did. So I hope that helped answer kind of how that looked. So use Mural, you stage it, but know the people you're working with, and you're always going to have some pre-work, because if they don't have this information, it's going to be very hard to do that activity.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Give
All right.
some noodle before, or research before.
All right, guys, any other questions for Veronica?
Maru has his hand up.
Yeah, Momo?
Oh, Momo. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on.
It's one of my nicknames. So
That's Maru.
Yeah, that's me.
Maru. Okay.
Thanks for that, Veronica. I dropped you a message on LinkedIn. We've been connected for several months now, but there was one that was burning my tongue. I couldn't stay away from asking it. Have you heard of product strategy sprints and strategy simulations in product management? So Teresa Torres's techniques have been applied by a variety of practitioners in the product community to do simulations of how product strategies unfold when you have multiplicity of choices and you don't want to commit to an outcome. I wanted to know, because it's many times it's just arbitrary. It's based on assumptions and biases and some wild guesses that people disguise as strategies, but there is nothing strategic about that. It's just wishes and many times visions turn into sketches of wishes and wish lists and stuff like that. So I was wondering if you've heard about that and if you have any opinion / experience.
I haven't worked hers, but I like where you're going with, because I didn't share this, but there's another group, Prodify, that they do vision-led product management. And then they have kind of a mindset where it's kind of like where you're going with the outcomes and some of the things that you actually have to answer, and going through that process to what you're describing. This what I've learned in an indirect way, you're absolutely right, because if they don't know some of these answers, it's kind of nebulous. And that's why I was saying what the vision is. If you don't know who your customer segment, guess what? You're going to have to do some discovery, what is highly related to Teresa Torres. This vision-led product management, what Prodify talks about, is also some of that thinking. So that's kind of why I said is you can't just go into these workshops if some of this information is nebulous.
Yeah, thanks, Veronica.
Yeah, I'm going to check that out with the strategy because I haven't seen her technique for the strategy piece, but I can see how it's relevant because you have to do some discovery to be able to fill in those Mad Libs, if you noticed.
Yeah, so the angle at which I came at this was very different. It was my background is in strategy. So what happened is I had to, it was not at all from a product discovery angle.
Yeah.
So what happened is I'm a design sprint facilitator. I was trained by the AG Smart guys in Berlin. And so I was doing some workshops before COVID on deep dives in specific strategy areas. And some of them were around products. And I was working with product managers and I was noticing that for historical systemic reasons, they were getting their input in terms of strategy, mostly from the outside. So they were cut off from all signals and input related to strategy. And so these tools, using some of the modeling tools like product outcome trees and stuff, have been very useful in some.
The whole opportunity tree?
Yeah, opportunity trees, yes.
Yeah, no, I love that. You're getting me out curious. Like I want to go in and talk about this more. I love this stuff. Yeah, let's connect offline and talk about, because again, anything that people are doing out there today and taking things and saying, hey, this is how I use it for this situation. I am like a sponge these days because it's fascinating.